when my HOA flooded my land with raw sewage and laughed in my face. I spent 2 weeks planning the perfect revenge they never saw coming. What would you do when 20,000 gallons of concrete is your only language they understand? Comment below where you're watching from. I never thought my peaceful life would turn into a smelly nightmare. It started on a Tuesday when I stepped into my backyard and nearly fell face first into a bubbling brown puddle. The awful smell hit me like a truck. Raw sewage was flowing onto my property from somewhere. My beautiful garden that I had spent 3 years perfecting was now drowning in poop water. My workshop where I built furniture was ruined, and my tools were soaking in filth. I couldn't believe my eyes. This wasn't just a small leak. This was a disaster. I immediately called the Maple Grove Estates HOA emergency line. After being on hold for 20 minutes, Karen Thompson finally answered. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm very busy today. What seems to be the problem?" she said, sounding annoyed. When I explained about the sewage flood, she sighed loudly. "We authorized some changes to the neighborhood plumbing yesterday. It's probably just a temporary side effect." Side effect? My entire yard is covered in sewage. This is a health hazard. "Don't be so dramatic," Karen replied. "We'll send someone to look at it next week when our regular maintenance team is available." Next week? Are you kidding me? I can't live with this for a week. "Well, Mr. Reynolds, perhaps you should have thought about potential drainage issues before building so close to the community line." She paused. "Or before buying in Maple Grove at all." That comment stung. I knew what she meant. Since moving in 3 years ago, Karen and her HOA friends had made it clear they thought I didn't belong. My house wasn't as fancy as theirs. I drove a 10-year-old truck instead of a shiny new luxury car. And I actually worked with my hands for a living. I hung up and called the county health department, but they said they couldn't come out until Friday. That meant at least 3 days of living with this mess. That night I couldn't sleep. The smell crept through my windows despite them being closed. My dog Rusty refused to go outside. I sat at my kitchen table looking at photos from last summer, my tomato plants winning first prize at the county fair, neighborhood kids learning how to build birdhouses in my workshop. All of that was gone now. The next morning, I decided to investigate myself. I followed the sewage flow uphill to where it seemed to be coming from. There, partially hidden behind some bushes on HOA common ground, was a new pipe sticking out of the ground. It was actively spewing waste directly toward my property. I took dozens of pictures and videos, then spotted Howard Wilkins, the HOA treasurer, walking his perfectly groomed poodle nearby. "Howard, hey, can you come look at this?" I called out. He pretended not to hear me at first, but I wasn't giving up. "Howard, this pipe is dumping sewage onto my land." Finally, he strolled over, keeping his distance from the mess. "Oh dear, that doesn't look good. The HOA installed this, didn't they?" I asked. Howard's face changed. "I'm not aware of any installation. Must be a county issue. Have you called them?" Karen told me yesterday that the HOA authorized plumbing changes. I'm afraid she must have misspoken. Now, if you'll excuse me, Precious needs her morning walk. He tugged his poodle away quickly. I was being lied to, straight to my face. By day 3, the sewage had started to create a small pond in my yard. The smell was so bad that my neighbors on either side had called to complain, to me, not to the HOA. Apparently, Karen had told them it was my sewage system that had failed. That evening was the monthly HOA meeting. I gathered all my evidence, put on my cleanest clothes, and headed to the community center. The room was packed with neighbors, none of whom would look me in the eye. I signed up to speak during the open comments section, but Karen kept pushing my turn back. Finally, after 2 hours of discussing lawn height regulations and the color of acceptable mailboxes, she called my name with obvious reluctance. "You have 3 minutes, Mr. Reynolds," she said, starting a timer on her phone. I connected my tablet to the projector and showed everyone the photos and videos of the new pipe. "This was installed by the HOA last week," I explained. "It's dumping raw sewage directly onto my property. My garden is destroyed, my workshop is ruined, and the smell is making my home unlivable." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some people looked shocked. That can't be right, Karen interrupted. The HOA hasn't authorized any such installation. Howard nodded in agreement. Our records show no such project. I pulled out my phone. Then why did you tell me on Tuesday that the HOA had authorized changes to the neighborhood plumbing? I recorded our call. This was a bluff. I hadn't actually recorded it, but I needed to see their reaction. Karen's face turned white, then red with anger. Recording calls without consent is illegal in this state, Mr. Reynolds. So you admit you said it? I said no such thing, and your time is up. She clicked her timer aggressively. As I gathered my things, I noticed a few neighbors looking at me with sympathy. One older woman even patted my arm as I walked past. Outside in the parking lot, a man approached me. I'm Daniel Hoffman, he said quietly. I live on Oakwood Drive. They did the same thing to my property last year when they built the community center. They needed somewhere to redirect the drainage. My heart raced. What did you do about it? Daniel looked at the ground. Nothing. I couldn't afford to fight them. I ended up selling my house at a loss and moving to an apartment. Karen's husband's company bought my place, fixed the drainage issue, and resold it for double. I drove home feeling sick to my stomach. Was this their plan? Force me out so they could snatch up my property? When I pulled into my driveway, I spotted Karen and Howard standing at the edge of my yard, pointing at different areas and making notes. They scurried away when they saw me. That night, I couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't just because of the smell. My mind was racing with questions. Why target me? What were they planning for my property? And most importantly, how was I going to fight back against an entire HOA that seemed determined to drive me away? I grabbed a notebook and started writing down everything that had happened so far. If this was war, I needed a battle plan. And the HOA had no idea who they were messing with. 6 days after the sewage first appeared, I woke up to something new: silence. The constant gurgling sound from my yard was gone. I rushed outside to find the flow had stopped, but what remained was a swamp of destruction. My once beautiful yard looked like a toxic waste site. I grabbed my phone and dialed Stanley Martinez, a plumber my buddy recommended. I need someone who won't be scared of going against the HOA, I explained. Stanley arrived an hour later in a beat-up truck with Martinez Plumbing. We'll flush your troubles away, painted on the side. His eyes widened when he saw my yard. Holy smokes, man, this is criminal, he exclaimed, pulling out a testing kit. This isn't just regular sewage. This has chemicals in it, the kind used in commercial plumbing systems. Stanley traced the sewage path, digging small holes along the way. Finally, he uncovered something shocking. A large diversion pipe that wasn't on any public records. This pipe, he said, pointing to a thick PVC tube, was installed recently. It's taking sewage from the community center and dumping it here instead of connecting to the main sewer line. He shook his head. Whoever did this saved about $50,000 in proper drainage costs. I paid Stanley extra to document everything and write up an official report. As he was leaving, he warned me, "These HOA types play dirty. My cousin lost his house fighting one in Redwood Hills." Armed with Stanley's report, I marched straight to the HOA office, a fancy suite in our neighborhood's small shopping center. The glass door had Maple Grove Estates, excellence in community living, etched in gold lettering. Inside, Meg, Karen's assistant, blocked my path like a goalkeeper. "Mrs. Thompson only sees people by appointment," she said without looking up from her computer. "This is an emergency," I insisted, holding up Stanley's report. "You'll need to email your concerns to the appropriate committee," she replied robotically. Through the glass door of Karen's private office, I could see her laughing on the phone, feet up on her desk. Our eyes met, and she deliberately swiveled her chair around. My blood boiled, but I knew losing my temper wouldn't help. Instead, I took pictures of the office layout, a detail that would become very important later. That evening, while checking my email, I discovered something that made my jaw drop. Someone had accidentally included all residents in an HOA board email chain. In it, Karen wrote, "The Reynolds situation is under control. We'll continue to deny any knowledge until he gives up." These working-class types can't afford lawyers anyway. Once he's desperate enough to sell, Thompson Development can move forward with the cul-de-sac expansion. I nearly fell out of my chair. Thompson Development was Karen's husband's company. They were deliberately flooding my property to force me out so they could develop the land. I forwarded the email to my new account before it could be recalled and printed 3 copies for safekeeping. The next day, I invited neighbors for coffee, starting with those who gave me sympathetic looks at the meeting. 5 showed up, including Jennifer Williams, who used a wheelchair. They denied my ramp request 3 times, Jennifer explained, said it would disrupt neighborhood aesthetic. I had to pay $7,000 to install it anyway and fight their fines. Michael Chin nodded. They fined me $500 a day for my solar panels until I took them down, even though state law protects solar installations. One by one, they shared stories of HOA abuse. By the end of our meeting, we had formed a group called Maple Grove Homeowners for Fair Treatment. I called my cousin Ryan, who owned Reynolds Concrete. After explaining my situation, he said, "Those jerks need to learn a lesson. Count me in." That weekend, I visited the county records office and discovered something interesting. The HOA had never filed proper permits for the community center's plumbing system. Even better, I learned their office would be closed for renovations the following week. Meanwhile, the sewage had dried into a toxic crust in my yard. The county health inspector finally came but said he couldn't definitively prove the HOA was responsible without more testing. Tests that would cost thousands. On Monday morning, I received a certified letter from the HOA, Notice of Violation, Unsightly Yard Conditions. They were fining me $100 per day until I cleaned up the sewage they had dumped. The letter was signed by Howard but had Karen's fingerprints all over it. That afternoon, I spotted Karen and Howard in my neighborhood again, this time with a man carrying surveying equipment. They scattered when they saw me watching. I decided to do more digging literally and figuratively. Under cover of darkness, I extended Stanley's exploration and found that the illegal pipe connected directly to the community center's main building, specifically from their new luxury spa facilities. I documented everything: dates, times, photographs, soil samples, the secret emails, and testimony from neighbors. I compiled it all into a binder titled HOA Sewage Scandal, the complete record. On Wednesday, I filed formal complaints with every agency I could find: Environmental Protection, County Health, Building Safety, Water Board, and State Housing Authority. But bureaucracy moves slowly, and I needed immediate action. My house was becoming unlivable, and my neighbors were starting to avoid me because of the smell. That night, I sat in my truck watching the HOA office. Workers were removing furniture, computers, and filing cabinets in preparation for the renovation. I noticed they took special care with an oil painting of Karen that hung behind her desk. "Careful with that. It's worth more than your yearly salary," I heard her bark at the movers. After they left, I walked around the building, noting the security camera locations. Only 2, both for show rather than function, and the simple lock on the back door. The next morning, I received another HOA letter. This one even more outrageous. Second notice: hazardous waste violation. The fine had increased to $200 per day, and they threatened legal action if I didn't immediately remove all waste from visible areas. They were punishing me for their illegal dumping. That evening, I called an emergency meeting of our homeowner group. 20 people showed up this time. "They're trying to force me out to develop my land," I explained, showing them the emails. "And they'll do it to anyone who stands in their way." Jennifer rolled her wheelchair forward. "What's your plan?" I smiled for the first time in days. "I think it's time the HOA got a taste of their own medicine. They flooded my property with something toxic and destructive. Maybe they need to experience that for themselves." "What are you thinking?" Michael asked, leaning forward. "I'm thinking about tomorrow night, when that office will be completely empty." I pulled out a blueprint of the building. "And I'm thinking about my cousin's concrete truck." The room fell silent as everyone realized what I was suggesting. "That's extreme," Jennifer finally said. "But after 3 years of fighting them with proper channels and getting nowhere, She didn't finish her sentence, but her eyes showed understanding. Michael looked worried. You could get in serious trouble. Maybe, I admitted, but I've tried playing by the rules. They're breaking laws and getting away with it because they think no one will stand up to them. I paused. I'm not asking anyone to help. In fact, it's better if you all have no knowledge of what happens next. As everyone left, Jennifer grabbed my hand. Whatever you decide, we've got your back. Just be careful. Karen has friends in the police department. Later that night, I called Ryan. Are you still willing to help with that special delivery we discussed? The truck is fueled up and ready, he replied. Just say when. I looked at the sewage wasteland that used to be my yard and thought about Karen's smug face as she deliberately turned away from me in her office. Tomorrow night, I said. And Ryan, bring the quick-drying industrial grade. I want it to set before anyone knows what happened. I hung up and stared at my phone, my heart pounding. Was I really going to do this? It would change everything, my fight with the HOA, possibly my future, maybe even my freedom. But then I remembered the email. These working-class types can't afford lawyers anyway. They thought I was powerless. They thought I would just roll over and take it. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I grabbed my notebook and started drawing up the final details of my plan. By this time tomorrow, the HOA office would be filled with something they couldn't ignore or deny. And Karen Thompson would finally learn what happens when you mess with the wrong homeowner. I woke up to the sound of bubbling sewage, now 4 days into this nightmare. The stench had gotten so bad my dog refused to go outside. That's when I decided to call Stanley Martinez, a plumber my dad had worked with years ago. Holy cow! Stanley whispered as he walked through my yard. His boots sank 3 inches deep in the muck. This ain't normal backup, friend. Stanley brought specialized cameras and equipment I'd never seen before. He spent hours tracing pipes underground, muttering and taking notes. By afternoon, sweat dripping from his forehead, he called me over. Look at this, he said, pointing to his camera screen. See that pipe? Brand new. And this connection here? Someone cut into the main sewer line and added this diversion pipe. It's dumping straight onto your property. My heart pounded. So this wasn't an accident? Not even close, Stanley replied, pulling out original neighborhood plans from the county records office. According to these maps, your land sits at the lowest point in Maple Grove. Instead of fixing their failing main line, they installed this bypass. Saved themselves about $80,000 in repairs by using your yard as a sewage pit. Stanley wrote up a detailed report with timestamps, photos, and exact locations of the illegal modifications. He even included estimates showing when the work had been done, just 2 weeks after their precious community center opened. This is straight up illegal, Stanley said, handing me the folder. Environmental Protection Agency would have a field day with this. I thanked Stanley and paid him from my dwindling savings. With his report clutched tightly in my hands, I drove straight to the HOA office, determination burning in my chest. The office sat in a small building near the community pool. Spotless windows, fresh paint, and flowers by the door made it look like something from a magazine cover. I pushed through the glass door, Stanley's report held high. Karen's assistant, Meg, jumped up from her desk. Do you have an appointment? She asked, blocking my path to Karen's door. I have evidence, I replied, trying to stay calm. Tell Karen I need 5 minutes. Through the glass partition, I saw Karen inside her office, laughing on the phone, a steaming cup of coffee on her desk. Our eyes met. Without missing a beat, she turned her chair around, her back now facing me. Mrs. Thompson is extremely busy today, Meg said with practiced sweetness. Perhaps next week? I left a copy of Stanley's report on Meg's desk. Make sure she gets this. It's proof the HOA illegally diverted sewage onto my property. As I turned to leave, I heard Meg's shredder start up. Looking back, I watched as she fed Stanley's report through it, maintaining eye contact with me the entire time. I drove home, hands shaking on the steering wheel. That evening, while checking my email, I noticed something strange. An email chain accidentally CC'd to all residents instead of just board members. My fingers froze over the keyboard as I read. Reynolds situation, containment strategy, was the subject line. Howard had written, "The diversion was necessary. Fixing the main line would have required a special assessment of $2,000 per household." Karen replied, "Reynolds' lot was always meant to be a drainage point anyway. If he complains, we deny everything. He can't afford legal action, and by the time county inspectors respond, we'll have our story straight." Another board member added, "His house is the cheapest in the neighborhood anyway. Should have never been approved." I printed every email, my printer running out of ink halfway through. I drove to the store, bought more ink, and printed everything again. Then I made 3 extra copies and stored them in different places. That night, rain poured down, making the sewage situation worse. Water began seeping under my back door. I stayed up until 3 a.m. using my shop vacuum to keep the filth from reaching my carpet. As I finally collapsed into bed, exhausted and heartbroken over my destroyed home, I made a promise to myself. Karen Thompson and her HOA cronies had picked the wrong person to mess with. I had evidence now. I had their own words admitting guilt. But most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I would fight back. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by papers, my laptop glowing in the darkness. By sunrise, I had read every word of our HOA bylaws, highlighted state environmental protection laws, and created a battle plan. First stop, County Environmental Protection Office. The clerk's eyes widened when I showed her Stanley's photos of raw sewage bubbling up through my grass. "This is a serious violation," she said, typing furiously. "We'll send an inspector tomorrow." But tomorrow became next week. And next week turned into we're understaffed. Government wheels turned slowly while my yard remained a toxic swamp. I couldn't wait anymore. I created a private Facebook group called Maple Grove HOA Truth. Within 24 hours, 37 neighbors had joined. "They denied my wheelchair ramp 3 times, wrote Jennifer Patel, who lived 2 streets over. "My husband carries me up our front steps every day." Michael Chun posted photos of a $3,600 fine for installing solar panels. State law protects homeowners' rights to renewable energy, but they said my panels disrupted neighborhood aesthetics. More stories poured in. Fines for gardens that were 1 inch too tall. Approval requests that mysteriously disappeared. Special assessments that funded improvements only near board members' homes. I organized everything into a document and emailed it to local news stations. No response. I filed formal complaints with the State Housing Authority. They promised to look into it within 90 days. Meanwhile, my backyard stench grew worse. My dog developed a rash from accidentally stepping in the muck. My once beautiful workshop, where I built furniture to sell at weekend markets, remained unusable. That workshop had paid my mortgage during tough times. On day 12 of my sewage nightmare, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Violation notice, improper yard maintenance. Fine, $100 per day until resolved. They were fining me for the mess they created. I drove to the HOA office again, determined to confront Karen. The office was empty except for a sign. Closed for renovations April 15th to 22nd. I stood there, steam practically coming out of my ears, when Mr. Gonzalez from across the street approached me. "They're installing marble countertops," he said, disgust in his voice. Karen bragged about it at the tennis club. $40,000 from our dues for fancy countertops while they ignore actual problems. That's when something clicked in my brain. If they could flood my property and face no consequences, maybe it was time for some creative justice. I called my cousin Ryan that evening. He owns Reynolds Concrete, a small business that's been in our family for generations. "Hey cuz, how much concrete could your truck hold?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "About 12 cubic yards. Why?" Ryan replied. I explained everything of the sewage, the denial, the shredded evidence, the fines, the renovations. "Those jerks," Ryan muttered. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that if they like flooding things so much, maybe their office needs a flood of its own. Silence on the line. Then, "You're talking about pouring concrete into their office? Are you crazy? That's destruction of property." "They destroyed my property first," I replied. "My garden is dead. My workshop is ruined. They're fining me for their illegal actions." Ryan sighed. "Look, I understand you're angry, but this isn't the way." He was right, of course. Concrete was too extreme. But Ryan's objection sparked another idea. "What about that eco-friendly removable foam you used for the Johnson project? The stuff that hardens like concrete but dissolves with that special solution?" Ryan paused. "Industrial construction foam? It looks like concrete, feels like concrete, but can be removed with the enzyme solution. It would make one hell of a point without causing permanent damage." We talked details for an hour. The foam would harden in minutes but could be dissolved later. It would cause disruption without destruction. It was perfect. That night, I drove around town gathering supplies. Construction gloves from the hardware store. A cheap burner phone. Masks from a craft store. I felt like I was in a spy movie, but this was my real life. The next day, I discovered Karen had posted an announcement about the HOA office renovations on the community board. Upgrading to better serve our valued residents. Grand reopening celebration next Friday. I could just imagine her smug face as she wrote "valued residents," while ignoring my sewage lake. My determination hardened like cement. I stayed up late reviewing my plan. Was I really going to do this? Was I crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed? Just then, my phone pinged with a message from Jennifer. "Health inspector finally came to see about your sewage issue. Karen told him you made it all up for attention. He left without even looking at your yard. That settled it. If they wouldn't follow the rules, why should I? If they could lie without consequences, maybe consequences needed to arrive in an unexpected form." I called Ryan. "We're on for tomorrow night," I said. "Bring the foam." What I didn't know then was that my plan would trigger a chain of events that would shake Maple Grove Estates to its foundation. My hands trembled as I checked my watch. 1:58 a.m. Karen's precious HOA office sat dark and quiet before me. Just yesterday, I'd watched her carefully remove her expensive items, that $3,000 coffee machine, those fake gold awards, and worst of all, the giant painting of herself that hung behind her desk like she was the queen of Maple Grove. "You ready for this?" Ryan whispered, parking his concrete truck 2 blocks away. We'd covered the company logo with magnetic signs reading, "County Maintenance." My stomach flipped as I nodded. "They've ruined my home, my garden, and my workshop," I said, thinking about the sewage still bubbling across my yard. "They laughed at me in that meeting. They called me working class like it was a dirty word." Ryan patted my shoulder. "That's why we're here, cousin." We worked quickly in the darkness. First, we picked the side door lock using skills I'd learned from YouTube videos. Then we ran the heavy rubber hose from Ryan's truck through the mail slot. It barely fit. Ryan started the pump, and I watched through the window as thick gray concrete began filling the office. "Wait," I hissed, suddenly realizing I could get better aim. I slipped inside, directing the hose first at Karen's desk, then at the filing cabinets that held all those threatening letters they'd sent to neighbors over the years. "This cabinet first," I told Ryan, pointing to where they kept property records. "They altered my lot map to make their sewage dump legal. Let's see them find those papers now." The concrete moved like slow, thick water, covering everything in its path. Computers disappeared under the gray tide. Karen's special leather chair, the one only she was allowed to sit in, sank slowly into the growing pond. The sound of the pump outside thrummed in my ears, matching my racing heart. 15 minutes left, Ryan called. We'd calculated exactly how much concrete would fill the space without breaking through walls or windows. Nothing would show from the outside until someone tried to open the door. I placed waterproof cameras in the ceiling corners. I wanted to see their faces when they discovered what had happened. Was this wrong? Probably. Did I care anymore? Not after weeks of sewage, lies, and being treated like dirt. Just before leaving, I stuck my work gloves into the half-set concrete on Karen's desk, making a permanent handprint. Then I pulled them out, leaving the perfect impression. A calling card. "We need to hurry," Ryan said, checking his watch. Dawn wasn't far off and early joggers would be out soon. As we packed up, Mrs. Gonzalez from across the street peeked through her curtains. Our eyes met. She'd been fined $500 last month because her rose bushes were non-approved vegetation. She slowly raised her hand in a small salute, then closed her curtains. We finished at 4:30 a.m., the concrete already beginning to harden. Ryan drove away with the empty truck while I walked home, heart hammering in my chest. Every car that passed made me jump. Every shadow seemed like a police officer waiting to arrest me. Back home, I showered, threw away my clothes, and sat on my porch, watching the sunrise. The sewage smell had become so normal I barely noticed it anymore. But soon, very soon, things would change. I checked my phone, no calls yet. What would happen when they found the concrete tomb I'd made of their office? Would they connect it to me right away? Would I go to jail? Suddenly, a car pulled into my driveway, an unfamiliar blue sedan. A man in a suit stepped out holding a briefcase. "Mr. Reynolds?" he asked, walking toward my porch. "My name is Daniel Wright. I'm from the District Attorney's Office, Environmental Crimes Division." My mouth went dry as dust. Had they already discovered what I'd done? How could they know so quickly? "We received your complaint about illegal sewage dumping," he continued, and I nearly collapsed with relief. "But there's something you should know about your HOA president, Karen Thompson, that might interest you even more." He opened his briefcase and handed me a folder of documents. "She's been under investigation for the past 6 months, and I think you just became our star witness." Screams echoed through Maple Grove at 8:30 a.m. sharp. I sipped my coffee calmly as chaos erupted down the street. My hidden cameras caught it all, Karen arriving first, trying her key in the door, then falling backward when she saw the solid gray mass filling her beloved office. Her face turned a shade of red I'd never seen on a human before. "Reynolds!" she screamed, somehow knowing immediately it was me. But I wasn't worried anymore. Not after what Daniel Wright had told me. The DA's office had been building a case against Karen for months. She hadn't just illegally dumped sewage on my land. She'd been stealing HOA funds, accepting bribes from contractors, and falsifying environmental reports for years. The sewage system that flooded my property? It saved her brother-in-law's construction company over $200,000 in proper installation costs. By 9 a.m., news vans lined our street. I watched from my kitchen window as reporters stuck microphones in Karen's face. She kept pointing at my house, her finger stabbing the air like a weapon. "That's when I made my move," I told Daniel. "Let's give them something to really report on." We walked together to the growing crowd, Daniel's badge clearing a path. Karen's eyes widened when she saw us together. "Mr. Reynolds," a reporter called, "did you fill the HOA office with concrete?" I smiled directly at Karen. "I'm not here to discuss any concrete. I'm here because Mr. Wright has evidence of serious crimes committed by our HOA president." Camera lights blinded me as Daniel stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson is under investigation for embezzlement, environmental violations, and fraud. We've been building this case for months." Karen's face crumpled. "This is ridiculous. He flooded my office with concrete. Arrest him." A police officer approached, but instead of coming for me, he handed Karen a paper. "Mrs. Thompson, this is a warrant to search your home and personal accounts." What happened next shocked everyone. Howard, the bow-tie-wearing treasurer, suddenly broke from the crowd and made a run for his car. 2 officers tackled him before he made it 10 feet. Papers flew everywhere, bank statements showing millions in missing HOA funds. By noon, both Karen and Howard sat in the back of police cars. Neighbors I'd never spoken to shook my hand. Jennifer hugged me, whispering, "They're finally reviewing my wheelchair ramp request." As for the concrete in the office, funny thing about that, nobody could prove who did it. My cameras mysteriously failed to record my presence, showing only the concrete slowly filling the room. Ryan's truck had no company logo visible in any footage. And the handprint I'd left? I had worked construction years ago, along with half the men in the neighborhood. "We know it was you," the detective told me later that week. "But without evidence, there's not much we can do. Besides, after what they did to your property, not many people around here blame you." 2 days later, the county environmental team arrived to finally clean up my yard. I watched as they removed tons of contaminated soil, replaced my garden, and rebuilt my workshop, all paid for by the HOA's insurance. At the emergency community meeting, the remaining board members were voted out. A new board was formed, with Jennifer as president. She immediately approved her own wheelchair ramp and Michael's solar panels. "We'd like you to join the board too, Reynolds," she said, but I shook my head. "I've had enough HOA drama for one lifetime, but I'll help with the community garden if you want." As for Karen and Howard, they both took plea deals to avoid longer sentences. Part of their community service involves environmental cleanup, sometimes right in front of my house. Karen can't look me in the eye anymore. The concrete office became something of a local legend. The insurance company spent $92,000 removing it, almost exactly what it cost to fix my property. Some called it karma. Others called it justice. 6 months later, as my garden bloomed again and the smell of sewage became just a bad memory, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a small piece of the concrete from the office, mounted like a trophy, with a note from Daniel. "Thought you might want a souvenir. Sometimes the hardest problems need the strongest solutions." I keep it on my desk as a reminder that when pushed too far, even the most patient person can surprise you. The HOA still exists in Maple Grove, but now it protects homeowners instead of bullying them. And me? I've become something of a neighborhood hero. Yesterday, Ryan and I sat on my porch, admiring my tomato plants, bigger and better than ever thanks to the new soil. "Was it worth it?" he asked quietly. I thought about everything: the stress, the fear, the sweet feeling of watching Karen being driven away in that police car. "You know what they say," I replied, raising my lemonade glass. "Revenge is a dish best served solid."